tucked away in the high peaks of the Pyrenees, is a tiny country most people barely notice on the map. Yet behind its size hides a story filled with ancient legends, unusual politics, and a culture unlike anywhere else in Europe. The question is, how did this little nation manage to survive and thrive for so long? Well, to answer that question, you've got to watch till the end, because I'm unveiling everything there is to know about Andorra. Archaeologists have found traces of the very first Andorrans living in caves and river valleys as far back as 3,500 BC. People settled along the Valira River, hunted, made tools, and even built megalithic structures like dolmens. The Balma de la Margineda cave even revealed the oldest skeleton ever found in the country, an Andorran woman who lived about 4,000 years ago. Isn't it amazing to think someone called these valleys home that long ago? By the 2nd century BC, the Pyrenees saw armies marching through. Hannibal and his Carthaginian troops crossed nearby on their way to attack Rome, fighting local tribes known as the Andosins. Rome eventually won control, leaving behind its influence in laws, agriculture, place names, and even the beginnings of the language. Later, the Visigoths took over until the 700s, when Muslim forces swept across the Iberian Peninsula. But Andorra, hidden deep in the mountains, was only lightly touched by their rule. This is where legend comes in. So, the story goes that in the year 805, the Emperor Charlemagne granted Andorra its independence, thanking the locals for helping him fight against the Saracens. Historians still debate how true that is, but it's such a powerful story that it even appears in Andorra's national anthem. The great Charlemagne, my father, set me free from the Arabs. But the first real written mention of Andorra comes a little later, in the 9th century, when 6 parishes were listed as belonging to the Bishop of Urgell, a powerful churchman just across the border in Spain. And this is where the tug of war began. Because Andorra's valleys were too valuable to be left alone, counts and bishops fought over who would rule this little mountain land. Finally, in 1278, peace came in the form of an unusual compromise, the Parishes treaties. They established that both the Count of Foix in France and the Bishop of Urgell in Spain would share power equally. From that moment, Andorra became a co-principality, a system so unique it still exists today. Isn't that wild? 2 rulers, 1 tiny country. Then, over the centuries, the Count of Foix's title passed along, eventually becoming tied to the kings of France, and later to the President of the French Republic. On the other side, the Bishop of Urgell never changed, and that's why even now, Andorra's 2 heads of state are the President of France and a Spanish bishop, which was pretty unusual to say the least. But going back, life in the Middle Ages wasn't all politics. Andorrans farmed, raised livestock, and built beautiful stone churches, many of which still stand today. They also paid their rulers in quirky tributes. I'm talking about stuff like hams, bread, wine, and even river trout. That's right, the first written tax in Andorra might have been paid in fish. And by the 15th century, Andorrans were granted something extraordinary, their own elected council. Called the Council of the Land, it was created in 1419 to solve local problems. Historians say it's one of the oldest parliaments in Europe. Did you know that? Through wars, dynastic marriages, and the rise and fall of kingdoms, Andorra somehow managed to keep its independence. It wasn't always easy, because during the French Revolution, France actually renounced its rights over Andorra for a time, seeing them as feudal leftovers. But Napoleon himself restored them, keeping the co-principality alive. Then came the modern age, and this brought new things to light, like books written about Andorran customs and the gradual opening of this once isolated country to the outside world. So by the 19th century, telegraphs, roads, and even opera performances in Paris and Madrid celebrated this little Pyrenean nation. And by the 20th century, Andorra was pushed further into the modern world. But despite all the improvements and innovations, women were still not allowed to vote in 1933. It wasn't until 1970 that real political change actually happened. Finally, women gained the right to vote, and a new executive branch was set up in 1982. And in 1993, Andorra adopted its very first constitution by popular vote, reducing the feudal powers of its co-princes and establishing a modern parliamentary democracy. That same year, it joined the United Nations. Since then, Andorra has signed agreements with the European Union, introduced taxes for the first time, and move toward more financial transparency. But before we talk about money, let me ask you this. Have you ever looked at a map of Europe and actually spotted Andorra? I know I haven't, but that's because it's tiny. It's wedged right between France and Spain, high up in the southern peaks of the Pyrenees Mountains. No coastline, no airports, no trains coming in. It's completely landlocked. And yet, this little patch of land has some of the most breathtaking mountain scenery in all of Europe. Andorra covers just 468 square kilometres, or about 180 square miles. To put that in perspective, it's smaller than the city of Chicago. But what it lacks in size, it makes up for in elevation. The entire country is basically a cluster of rugged mountain valleys, carved long ago by glaciers. Streams cut through the valleys, eventually joining together to form the Valira River, which is considered Andorra's lifeline. At the highest point, you'll find Pic de Coma Pedrosa, which towers at 2,946 metres. That's 9,665 feet above sea level. Besides this, one of Andorra's crown jewels is the Madriu Perafita Claro Valley. It takes up about a tenth of the country's land and is filled with glacial landscapes, steep valleys, and open pastures. It's so special that UNESCO declared it a World Heritage Site in 2004. And because of the altitude, Andorra's climate is a mix of temperate mountain weather. Winters are cold and snowy, which is perfect for skiing, while summers are warm and dry, ideal for hiking. Temperatures dip to around -1 degrees Celsius, or 30 degrees Fahrenheit, in January, and climb to about 20 degrees Celsius, or 68 degrees Fahrenheit, in July. Not too extreme, but you'll definitely want a good jacket in the winter. Now, Andorra might be small, but it's divided into 7 parishes, each with its own charm. Starting with Canillo, it's the largest parish in size, but one of the least populated. If you love nature, this is paradise. Here you'll find the Inclés Valley, one of the most beautiful glacial valleys in the country, along with hiking trails for all levels. There's also the Roc del Caire viewpoint, where you can step onto a platform that feels like you're floating above the valley, and a Tibetan-style suspension bridge that stretches nearly 900 metres, or almost 3,000 feet, through the air. Move a little further, and you reach Encamp. This one's perfect for outdoor lovers too, with easy access to the massive Gran Valira ski resort via a cable car called the Funicamp. Encamp also has its own gems like the National Automobile Museum, an unexpected collection that traces the history of cars, and the Church of Santa Eulalia, which boasts the tallest Romanesque bell tower in Andorra at 23 metres, or 75 feet. Then there's Ordino, maybe the most picturesque parish of them all. Its streets feel frozen in time, lined with stone houses and traditional Andorran architecture. History buffs will love the Casa da Reni Plandolit, a noble family's mansion turned museum from the 17th century. And if you're into nature, Ordino has the Sorteni Valley, a UNESCO biosphere reserve with over 800 plant species, plus the Tristina Solar Viewpoint, a giant sundial perched at 2,701 metres, or 8,860 feet. La Massana is the adrenaline capital. In winter, its Pal Arinsal ski slopes are a family favourite, and in summer, it transforms into a mountain biking mecca, even hosting UCI World Championships. Nearby is the Coma Pedrosa Nature Park, home to Andorra's highest peak and filled with forests, waterfalls, and alpine lakes. But among all these, the heart of the country has got to be Andorra la Vella, the capital. This is where you'll find bustling shopping streets, cosy restaurants, and historic buildings like the Casa de la Val, the old Parliament building dating back to the 16th century. Head south, and you'll arrive in Sant Julià de Lòria, the warmest and lowest lying parish. It's the gateway into Andorra from Spain, and is famous for Nautchland, an adventure park where you can ride the Tobotronc, the longest alpine toboggan in the world. Imagine racing down a mountain on a sled track that seems to go on forever. Finally, there's Escaldes en Gordony, the parish of hot springs. Thermal waters bubble up here, and locals have been using them for centuries. Today they feed into Caldea, one of the largest thermal spa complexes in southern Europe. Add in art, Romanesque churches like Saint Michel d'Engolastes, and scenic spots like Lake Engolastes, and you've got the perfect mix of culture and relaxation. So, for a country that's only about the size of a small city, Andorra packs in a staggering amount of natural beauty and variety. More than that, this tiny country also has a fascinating political system and an economy that punches above its weight. Let's start with politics. Andorra is unusual because it's a co-principality, which I talked about earlier. But just to give you a quick refresh, this basically means it has two heads of state. On one side, you've got the President of France, and on the other, the Bishop of Urgell from Spain. Together they serve as Andorra's co-princes. But don't picture them running the country day to day. Real political power lies with a local parliament called the General Council, and an elected head of government who makes most of the important decisions. It's a system that's unique in the world, and, surprisingly, it works. Now, when it comes to the economy, Andorra is small but mighty. The entire country's GDP was about $4 billion in 2024. That's around the size of a mid-sized city in other parts of the world. Still, because the population is tiny, the average income per person is quite high. The economy has proven pretty resilient too. In 2024, growth was a healthy 2.1%, driven by banking, construction, and services. Plus, inflation is cooling down, settling at about 2.6%. But here's the thing, Andorra's growth story isn't so much about making people richer, it's about having more people, because for the past 50 years, income per person has barely budged, and a lot of the country's economic expansion has simply come from population growth. Looking ahead, that poses a challenge. Why? Because Andorra's population is aging. With longer life expectancies and fewer babies being born, the balance between workers and retirees is going to get tricky. More spending on pensions and healthcare is expected, and that's going to test the government's finances. And then there's climate change. Winters in Andorra mean tourism, and tourism means skiing. But as global temperatures rise, snow seasons get shorter and less predictable. That puts Andorra's main economic engine at risk. To adapt, the country is being pushed to diversify, developing other industries like digital technology, banking services, and even wellness tourism. The good news is that Andorra has kept its books pretty clean. Public debt is relatively low, and the government has room to invest in things that will prepare it for the future, like affordable housing, better connectivity, and upskilling its workforce. They're even considering pension and healthcare reforms, though those are never easy conversations in any country. One big move on the horizon is Andorra's association agreement with the European Union. If it goes through, it could open doors for investment and trade, while also raising the standards of local institutions to match European norms. It's not without risks, of course, but if handled well, it could give the country a strong boost. Now, if politics and the economy give Andorra its structure, it's the people and their culture that give the country its personality. And what's fascinating is how this tiny place has managed to keep its own identity alive. Language is at the heart of it. The official tongue here is Catalan, a language that grew out of Latin back in the early Middle Ages. Over time, it picked up bits and pieces from Germanic tribes, Spanish and French influences, becoming something uniquely its own. Which brings us to food. Imagine warm bread rubbed with tomato, drizzled in olive oil, and sprinkled with salt. That's pa amb tomate, or smoky grilled onions called calços, dipped into nutty romesco sauce. Come winter, the season brings dishes like escudella, a rich stew of meat, beans and potatoes, perfect for the cold mountain nights. And if you've got a sweet tooth, there's mel ai mató, a soft cheese drizzled with honey. The flavours are rustic, simple and comforting. Exactly the kind of food you'd want after a day in the Pyrenees. But food is only part of the celebration. Andorrans love their festivals, and they've got plenty. Some come from deep Catalan traditions like Revetlla de Sant Joan, where bonfires light up the summer night, and people dance dressed as witches and devils, swinging fireballs in the air. Others are more religious, like the Diada de Meritxell on September 8th, honouring the country's patron saint with pilgrimages, music, and community gatherings. Then there's Carnival. This is when the streets explode with costumes, parades, and dancing. And in each parish, the Fiesta Mayor turns the town into a stage, with processions, fireworks, and music echoing into the valleys. Speaking of, music and dance are another part of daily life. Traditional dances like the contrapas or maracxa, along with the ever-popular sardana, are performed at festivals, often with people in traditional costumes, bright, colourful, and full of detail. So here's the real question. Which festival would you absolutely love to go to? Is it Carnival, the summer solstice, or Merit Excel Day? I mean, I'd love to go to all three, but if you could choose just one, which would top your bucket list? Sound off in the comments section below. And as always, if you loved this video, you're going to enjoy this next one.